I'm going to talk today about court, prison, coroners records and also wills. Now this talk should last about 40 minutes and I'll take questions afterwards. I'm conscious that people may have to get away early, so we aim to finish around 2 o'clock. But if you have to nip on before that, by all means just make your way out. The records we're going to talk about today are a unique range of records that were held by PRONI, and just to talk about how they can be used for family history purposes. There's a lot of ground to cover, so it'll be a quick gallop through the types of records we have. Many people will think, when they think of court records and so on, they have a degree of trepidation about accessing these types of files and records, and they might be afraid of what they might discover coming to PRONI, and avoid looking at those for fear someone might be looking and saying, why are they looking at that type of record? Well, I can tell you now, they're very interesting records and very useful for family and local historians alike. They give a unique insight into life in the 18th, 19th century and also 20th century, but also they might tell you more about what happened in a particular event, either in your family or in your locality. The records that we're going to talk about today range from criminal and civil court files, inquests, prisoner files, as well as wills and their associated grants of probate and the letters of administration. Many of these records, as Steve has said, are underused or overlooked, as it may not be apparent how they can be of use to family historians or the local historian. And it's important to note that while many of these records that we're talking about today are closed for 100 years, researchers can still apply to see them under legislation, under FOI or data protection. As I say, they can be very useful then for researchers. As well as that, we need to talk about arrangement as well. And you're wondering, how do I access these records? How do I find them? Well, in everything we've done here at PRONI, you have to think about how they were created and where they were created, and in that way you'll find out where they're listed in our collections, which is very important. The first thing we're going to talk about then are court records, and PRONI literally has thousands and thousands of court records in its custody. Now they're listed across the 7 Crown and Peace jurisdictions, which is basically the counties of Northern Ireland and also Belfast. And they range from 1711 to 1998. And the more recent records after that date are still with the court service in Belfast or around the country. And you'll see there the 7 prefixes under which they are all recorded. So if you're from County Antrim and you're looking for County Antrim court records, you'll search under ANT prefix and then drill down through the catalogue to find the record you're looking for. You can either browse or search. Also, we also have other court records which are to do with the actual court files. So a criminal or a civil case taken in a court. And they date from the 1820s. There are a few gaps, and then they start in earnest around 1885. And the early ones there relate to petty session records, which we'll talk briefly about a little bit later. As I say, PRONI has thousands of these records relating to all the courts of Northern Ireland and prior to the establishment of Northern Ireland. So we've got High Court, Crown Court, Magistrates Court, the County Court, Court of Appeal, and then Petty Sessions. All of these, with the exception of the last 2, are under the 7 jurisdictions, and they're still there to this day. Now, here we have an example of a Moira Petty Sessions order book from 1851. And you'll just see here, this is an early one of our earlier records. And you'll see here Patrick Mawhinney of Ballymacatire in County Down. Well, he's being charged with allowing his pig to stroll along the public road in October 1851. And he gets fined at 6 pence for the as his conviction. So James Walsh, the sub-constable, has brought the case to the Petty Sessions, and we will have hundreds and hundreds of these volumes listing people who were had to pay fines at the petty sessions courts right up until 1991. Now obviously the 20th century ones that are under 100 years old will be closed because they contain personal data about an individual. But anyone over that age or older than say 1915 will be open to the public, and you can come in here and order it out and view it in the reading room. Now that obviously is listed under HA bar 1, and you'll see there it goes to bar 80 on the reference. We have over 100 petty session courts in Northern Ireland. Obviously they're all shrunk down now over the time they've been dissolved, and the functions have transferred to other offices. But in the heyday of petty sessions, there were about 115 offices in Northern Ireland, and Moira is number 80 in our catalogue. So if you know the local petty sessions office in your area, you would search the catalogue under HA bar 1 and then see what we have, and they're arranged in alphabetical order. Now, as I say, it's important to know where the case was heard. So we know that Patrick O'Malley was living in a town called Ballymacatier, and his local office was in Coroner, where he would have then had to pay his 6p fine. And we know that in days gone by, you would have had motoring offences and other fines to pay for keeping a dog with like a muzzle, and maybe perhaps in the earlier days here, leaving your apprenticeship early without due notice. And these are all offences that could be, people have to pay a fine. So it's rather extreme when we think about what life is like now. In terms of looking at the particular court, you would need to try and locate a file about somebody. It's important to know what court that case was heard in. Obviously you can write into PRONI here and ask, but if you're not sure, you'd have to browse the catalogue or do a search. And in all of our court records, we would have a range of offences, thousands of files relating to robbery, theft, larceny, manslaughter, murder, and other equally more serious crimes. And in all of those, we will record the name of the individual or individuals who committed the offence, and the nature of the offence, and then there's a bill number, which is really the order in which the cases are heard that day in that particular court. And that's how you locate the file. So if you think the case is heard in Antrim Magistrates Court, you look under ANT, then under the criminal cases, which is bar 1, and then the year of the case. I'm not sure, you just browse through the catalogue until you find the case. Now we haven't kept all cases. We kept the most serious cases, obviously, and then the very minor offences, such as Mr. McAteer's pig strolling down the road. We wouldn't have kept that file, but we have an entry here in the register to tell us it happened. Otherwise we'd be keeping every single court record known to Northern Ireland, and we would need to build another office just to house them all. Obviously then, in terms of the structure, we would have from the very low level instances such as this to the most high level, high profile cases in Northern Ireland and in the 19th century stored here. Obviously they go from the High Court right down to petty sessions. But as I've said there, most will be closed for 100 years, but they can be applied for under FOI. I'll just go on here, just bear with me. Now, we have then the Crown and Peace. Now, you're wondering why are they stored under Crown and Peace references, the court records? Well, that was the system in place when we acquired the records. So we're trying to recreate how these records were created by the courts, and the courts were administered under a Crown and Peace legislation. But also in the 19th century, the Crown and Peace authorities were responsible for also these roles. So they were responsible for administering the grand jury, for holding coroners' inquests and that whole system of inquests, issuing licenses to people and to businesses, freeholders, electoral registers and keeping the electoral roll up to date, But the testimony papers, they've not. That's sort of just a mistake in my PowerPoint, but that was a separate entity. They were not responsible for testimony to probate records. So you'll see there that the Crown and Peace do have a lot of other records other than simply the traditional Crown records that we think about when you think of a criminal case. They're also very important, and I'll talk a little bit about these in turn. Just going back to the traditional court records that we think about, each case, we have thousands of case files or Crown Court files here about criminal cases that happened, and we've talked about before. And those, they contain things like the verdict of the case, witness statements, and transcripts of the evidence. But they don't give the evidence itself. So there won't be pieces of evidence in the file. It will simply be what was brought to the trial. And as I say, these are arranged in chronological order. And I've also listed the parties involved and the outcome of the case, which is very important. And then on top of that, we would have Crown books, which are an entire inventory of all of the cases heard in each court. And again, you can look through those. There's no index to those. They're simply going through the book itself and going through each day and hearing what's heard on a particular day in court. These can all be searched on the PRONI catalogue using either the name of the person or the offence that's being brought to court. We also then have what's called Chancery records, and these relate to the Chancery division. Now, the court system is very unwieldy, very intricate, and I'm not a legal expert, but in terms of what PRONI has, we have quite a considerable number of Chancery records relating to disputes over land, rights of way, tenancy agreements and so on from 1921 through the 1990s. And again, the more recent records will be held by the court service, who are probably still administering those records. They're still current in many ways. You'll see here the grand jury records are unique in that they go from 1711 to the late 60s, and they're invaluable. They tell you all about, well, I'll talk about that in a minute, but they're extremely important. You'll see here, I've got nothing there yet. Now I should say here, the Crown Court files that are previously listed into the 7 districts, after 1979, they become the court service is reorganised, and they have a separate unique reference beginning with CRCT, which is basically Crown Court abbreviated. And for every case after that that's heard in the Crown Court, you look under that. And then below Crown Court are the various courts, which are then listed 1, 2, I think 15. Again, you can search this online. It's all there to view. Then we do have here, the High Court was split into 3 divisions, but we're just focusing on today on the Chancery. And in terms of that, it's got Chancery, which I talked about with the land records. We have some bankruptcy files from the early 20s right up to the 1970s. Maybe about 2,000 of those files. We don't take any more in because there'll be so many to take in. We might take a sample. And also we'll talk about probate, which we have a large number of records about that. But we don't have company, so that's why it's not in bold. Now we're on to the grand jury. The grand jury was responsible for administering local government in Ireland, and that continued until the late 19th century. And they were mainly responsible for administration of the courts, validating indictments for trials. So they saw the evidence and said, is the trial fit to proceed to court? A bit like our PPS today. Then they also were responsible for publicly funding institutions such as the asylums and the paper hospitals. And also, importantly, for the local historian, they're responsible for levying that local cess that paid for the building of roads, bridges and so on in local communities. and these are extremely important for local historians to look at. Here is a 1780 grand jury presentment book, which basically, which can be viewed from PRONI for County Down. Simply states what roads are being repaired and between which parts of the locality are being repaired. So, for example, here we've got William McKeown's land from Widow Woods' house to the Belfast Road outside Kiddelay. So it'll tell you there exactly whereabouts the road is being repaired and who is living where. And they even talk about, they refer to ditches as mearings. So a ditch, they don't refer to ditches here, it says that the mearing or the boundary between Widow Smith's farm in a particular townland and then another farmer down the road. So you'll know are the families still in that locality or not in the 1780s. Now, for each county they're represented, and each county is different in terms of what has survived. But for County Down, we go back to the 1780s. County Armagh is 1710, so they're really, really early records here that are not, you can't get that information anywhere else. They also tell you about when roads were constructed. So if you're looking for, especially in the famine era, where famine relief was taking place, these are recorded here as to what is happening in the local community. Very important for local historians. Then, as we go through, they become printed. So about 1800, they go from manuscript form to printed form, and we would have a large number of printed returns across Northern Ireland. So here we have the presentments again, grand jury meet in Downpatrick, 1814, and the list of all of the works that are being done, and crucially, who is doing the work. So who is responsible for overseeing that work? And we'll name maybe 2 or 3 individuals of sort of upper middle class rank who would be, or low level gentry, might say, who would be administering this work. And that's also important for local historians to know who are they working for, and it might give you the names of the individuals who are actually doing the work then as well. There are some annotated in the registers. And you'll see here they're also responsible for killing vermin. So for employing people to kill crows and rats and so on in the community, and also for transporting prisoners to and from the jail or the bridewell in the area. Extremely important local resource, I think you'll agree, that many people don't really look upon as worth looking at, but very important. And again, 1847, again here you'll see, what you see here, I can see it, it's the third one down there, Henry Bassett on the left here, and it talks about the mearing at Crossgar Bog, and between the Coir Bridge and the Crossgar Bog, so they're having to do work there outside Downpatrick. And then the money that's used to pay for that and how it's gathered in. They'll also talk about how the goods are transported to the work. So it might be by boat, it might be by canal. So again, it builds a picture of what life is like and what's happening across Ireland at this time. And that's right from the 1711 to the 1840s. Now we'll go on to the Coroners Inquests. Coroners Inquests are a very useful resource for family and local historians. Now again, they are quite, the nature of them, they're dealing with a person's death, and they're trying to establish how a person has died, and that's the real reason for a Coroner's Inquest. They give the name of the person who has died, their age, their address, and where they died. That's assuming they know who the person is. Because in the late 19th century, from the records we have, a person is found and nobody knows who the person is. but there still has to be an inquest into the cause of this person's death, whether it be by foul means or not. Also gives the name of jurors, who would have been men from the local district, and there's usually 12 of them, who then look at the evidence and reach a verdict or findings as to how the person has died. Not all records have survived, unfortunately, for inquests. While we hold 25,000 for 1870 to 1998, you're probably talking 3 or 4 times that have not survived in PRONI, and we didn't get them. This was because the system of coroners' inquests, which dates back to the medieval period, was administered in Ireland in that we had 1 full-time coroner and then 6 part-time coroners, each with their own county across Northern Ireland, and they all hired deputy each. But as part of it was meant that the coroner's papers themselves usually ended up either in the coroner's own office or at their home, and they did not transfer to PRONI because they were thrown out, unfortunately, or destroyed in some way, or kept in damp conditions, we just don't know. The coroner obviously had to have been a practicing barrister or lawyer for 5 years standing before he could apply or could be appointed as a coroner. And in 2006, the system was totally reorganised, and we now have 1 senior coroner, John Leckie, and 3 deputies. And that senior coroner is due to retire very soon, so that will change again, perhaps. But in all of these inquests contain the following information. They do always contain, and must always contain, the verdict or the findings as to what happened to the person, and then statements of witnesses who are brought to the coroner's court to give evidence as to what they saw or what they said to the person and so on, and that they saw the person or they were there when the event happened. However, that's what they always contain, but many more contain, certainly the later ones, contain a post-mortem report, which is an examination of the deceased's body, a police report, a very short report, admittedly, maybe doctor's notes, and also photographs of the scene of the event and so on. And they are very distressing because they obviously deal with a person's last moments on earth, and we're very sensitive about handling those queries. But they do, the late 19th century ones do give a good indication of the types of things that were going on in the community, and again giving insight into life. And really, people will know an event happened, but perhaps not quite the details of how it happened. So here you have an 1895 inquest into the death of James Whiteside, and he was 30 years old, and he was on his horse, and the horse bolted, and he was caught in the stirrups and dragged along the road and suffered severe head injuries as a result. And when he was found, he was just there no more, and then he passed away about half an hour later. But it tells you where he was from. He was a labourer, unmarried and so on. But it tells you the exact circumstances of what happened to him, which you may have known. Oh, that young fella James, he died young, but not exactly what happened. Whereas here you have it in black and white and explains the whole story. And then there are obviously the local men from the community who would have probably sort of known this man, James Whiteside, and their local farmers or businessmen who would be able to reach a verdict and go through the whole process. So they're very important, and we will have about 6,000 to 10,000, about 10,000 late 19th century inquests of this nature, and that's obviously the verdict as to what's happened there. There are statements with this case which I haven't displayed here today, but they also tell you about maybe the brother or the mother of the person in question and what they've said, and it's all written down, and then obviously you can read it at your leisure. Also, as part of the Crown and Peace archive, whilst they're also responsible for coroner's inquest and that whole administration of that system, and appointing the coroners and so on, they're also responsible for issuing licenses to people. So that could be for spirit licenses, spirit grocers and so on across Northern Ireland. And here we have one from Fermanagh, 1885. Lists all the spirit grocers in Fermanagh. This is just one page of a multi-page document listing all the people who own the pub where they'll sell alcoholic beverages and so on, and where they obtained their license from and where they were situated or located. And again, it backs up what we have in our geographical indexes here in PRONI. You'll have a name of a person who's running a business, and that might be, you might want to know how long my business has been running for, or who ran it before our family ran it, and so on. And again, building up a picture of life in a local rural community. Also then, here's one where the actual license is given to an individual. So we have Peter McBrien of Conway Square, Newton Ards, and his pub there, he's able to sell spirits and beer and cider by retail. So he's able to do that in 1910 in Newton Ards, and we have thousands of these forms of licenses that are given out across Northern Ireland. Then we'll move on then to the probate. PRONI holds over 500,000 wills and grants relating to individuals from 1900 to 2006. These are extremely important, as you know, because of what they contain, and they're a very valuable source of information for both the genealogist and the local historian. And they give the name, the address, the occupation of the testator, i.e. the person who's leaving the will, the names of the beneficiaries, and sometimes their address and occupation, and details of lands and goods possessed, and the names of the executors or witnesses and so on, who may also be related to the person. And they help to establish relationships between and friendships between families. So if a person's an executor, you think, well, they must be friendly with my family way back, you know, and that sort of supports the links that you have today, perhaps, in your family history. Before 1858, wills were administered through the church courts, and there were two church courts really. There was the established church court, what was known as the prerogative of the Archbishop of Armagh, who was responsible for administering estates worth more than £5 in more than one diocese. Now, obviously that would mean that more wealthy people will have their estate administered that way. And then there was the more sort of ordinary court called the Diocesan Consistorial Court, which were responsible for any properties worth less than £5. And they went on, they were from the sort of 16th century right up until 1857. Following the Probate Act in 1857, wills were then administered by the prerogative court in Ireland. And it's the system we have today, basically, where it became a civil matter, no longer an ecclesiastical matter. In terms of diocesan wills, PRONI would have a list or an index of the pre-1858 wills on name search on our catalogue, which you can browse through. Now, unfortunately, this is the bad story now, the bad news. After the abolition of the ecclesiastical courts, the wills were then sent, as the years went by, the old Public Record Office in Dublin was established in 1867, and the wills were transferred there. Now, 1922 happens, and the wills are destroyed, unfortunately. However, some have survived in collections here at PRONI and in the National Archives in Dublin, because the individual who made the will obviously retained a copy themselves, and it may indeed be the case that the will has survived in their own family papers or in other government papers that it was important to have a will in it, such as land and so on. So Whilst many were destroyed, some have survived in copy form. So the information is still retained. That's the key thing. The information is there to look back upon. Also then, that's the bad news over with, hopefully. Then the images of copy wills, which are 1858 onwards, are available to view on PRONI's Will Calendar Index. So if you know the name of the person, you can search through the name or indeed the place under the any text field and locate the file, and then you'll see the image icon, which you then select, and it will view the copy will image. As I said there, copies of the wills are contained within other collections in PRONI, so it's worth doing a search of our catalogue for the name of the individual, and if it comes up in a D number or a T number, a transcript number, then you order that out and do it. And we would certainly have, I would say, I don't want to say bigger in case it's wrong, but certainly high hundreds, if not low level thousands of wills that are in these collections across PRONI. PRONI then has in its custody, and which can be ordered out today if you want, all original wills that were proven in Armagh District Registry, Belfast and Londonderry, for the dates that you see there. Now Armagh ceases to be a registry in September, the 30th of September 1921, and the functions that it was responsible for are then moved to Belfast. Obviously Londonderry Probate Office deals with the northwest, so Londonderry County, Tyrone and parts of Fermanagh go to Londonderry and the rest go to Belfast. And we have 500,000 documents here. We'd love to go and do a scanning project to get these wills online, but it's a mammoth task getting these indexed and sold properly. Now, the wills, everything I've talked about today, I should say, is on our catalogue. The exception will be the wills, which have their own separate will index or will application, and which you can search freely and order out wills and so on from. But everything else is on the catalogue. The testimony papers in PRONI, well, we have an index of wills, which are the hard copy volumes, and they're available in the search room, 1858 to 2005. However, if you're more geared up for searching and browsing online, or even coming to PRONI and doing it, the 1858 to 1965 are available to search using the online application. Various means, by name, by location, by address, townland, date of death, whatever you want to do, you can search it any way you want, to get multiple returns or different types of returns. Normally we used to get wills from the Probate Office 5 years after the wills were proven, to allow the Probate Office to finish using them for their own purposes. Now that transfer is currently under review at the minute, so as soon as we hear back from the court service about what the transfer arrangements are, we will let you know. So I'm sorry if you've ordered wills that you think should be here and they're not here. They're still with the Probate Office either in Belfast or Derry, but the system is under review at the minute, and we can't give an indication as to what that transfer date will be yet. We hope it will be this year. And as I say here, researchers wishing to obtain a copy of a will proved in Belfast from 2005 or from Derry from 2007 should consult the relevant office, either Belfast or Londonderry offices, for that. But as I say, wills are extremely important, very useful. They contain the full name of the deceased, the date of probate, and this is how to find it, sorry, the location of the probate, which is very important, and the type of record that you're wanting. So if it's a will, if it's a grant of probate, authorising the transfer of the estate to various beneficiaries, the letters of administration, which means if a person does not leave a will, they are intestate, and therefore an individual has to apply to be given letters of administration to administer the estate. Then you'll have what's called a will annexed, which is simply where there's been a problem with the estate. Perhaps the executor has died, or one of the beneficiaries has died before the testator. So therefore, what happens to the property that's been bequeathed? Where does it go? So these have to be sorted out before the whole estate can be wound up. You also have special grants and DBN grant, or De Bono Note grant, where again there's maybe a challenge to an estate, and that can hold things up. But they're very exceptional. These last two are exceptional cases. Perhaps where the testator has died, and then in the midst of the administration, the executor then dies before the estate's wound up, and again that can hold things up while they try and find a replacement executor to administer the will. So that's where those latter two occur. You'll see here, that's the PRONI catalogue, the online applications, I should say. I've done a search there for 1918 grants, and you'll see there that the Henry Abraham, there's an image with his will, 1918, and Mariah Atchison, again, images for her will. There are no images currently for these other wills, simply because the images that are on the application are taken from copy will books. Although the wills up to 1900 were destroyed in the Four Courts, before they were sent to Dublin, they were transcribed into what we call copy will books. Huge volumes, handwritten, of a complete transcription of a will. We then have those in our custody. They were kept in the local offices of Belfast, Armagh and Derry, and we have them here permanently. But we only have them for certain dates, so hence the fluctuation in whether we have an image or not to scan and copy. But what we have copied, we've copied and scanned, and the images are there. For all other ones, you have to refer to the original wills, whereas these, you can view it today and without having to order anything out. But rest assured, it is a complete word-for-word copy of the original will. Then, once you drill down, say you select one of those items, and you'll see here the complete transcription or abstract of that will. They'll give you the bare bones of the estate. So we know here that Ellen Cunningham lived in Brackney West in County Down. She was a widow. She died in 1920, and she left her property to her son, Thomas Cunningham. But William McAfee, this man here, he is the attorney, so he's acting on behalf of the son, who is living in America. But importantly, it gives you the address of the son, and he's living in New York City in 1920. So it tells you, it gives you a leap forward to say, well, this is what happened to the relative who left and went to America. And I now know which part of America he was living in. He was living in New York City, and his actual home address is there. So you can actually perhaps locate him, or what happened to him, where he was working and so on, through the census records in America or other sources. Now here is the original. That is the grant of probate for another individual. This is Thomas McRoberts. And actually, fact, sorry, it's not a probate, it's an administration. So Thomas McRoberts here did not leave a will. He died intestate, hence the word administration at the top here. Now, he still has an estate which needs to be processed. He has money or his land or his property, but he didn't leave a will. What happens? Well, his next of kin can apply to have these what's called letters of administration taken out and have the estate administered either into their name or into other people's names. So again, it says here, John McRoberts, the administration is given to John McRoberts, farmer, the lawful attorney of John McRoberts, now residing in Toronto, and he is the lawful son of the said intestate. So John McRoberts is some other person, don't know who he is, this first man here, but he's obviously helping the deceased's son get the property on his behalf. Obviously, he can't be in two places at once. He can't be in Ireland and in Canada. So obviously, relative back home is helping him sort that out. But again, it gives you a very important insight into where people are living and takes you forward to then locate that family member across the water. And again, you'll see here, this is a search carried out for anyone who died on the 1st of July 1916. And you'll see here, there are quite a few people who were in the army, who died at the Somme, on the first day of the Somme. And here we have Joseph Gurley of the 7th Battalion Canadian Expeditionary Force. So again, it's just to see what types of searches you can do on that online application. A couple of just unusual ones. We have here a will of Robert Spence of Dromore, County Down, and he has a whole list of stipulations in his will as to what should be done and so on. At point number 5, he says that he gives his wife £20 a year to live on, provided that she abstain from all drink and not bring the family name into disrepute in any way. Now, this man was in his 70s and when he died, and he left a considerable amount of property behind him, but everything was down to the final the pence, shilling and pence really, accounted for. And then you have another lady here, Sophia Shields, and simply to show you that everything that she owned was accounted for. She gave her feather bed to one neighbour and clothes for it, another female neighbour, she gave another bed and clothes. She gave her oak cabinet to another neighbour. Another neighbour then got, Eliza McByrne got the corner cupboard in her lower room. And I know that this lady did a little cottage, so there only were 2 rooms in the house, but she still managed to divide out what she wanted to specific people, so they would benefit from her estate. And then she finally leaves her farms, or she says that all her farms, which was a small holding, should be sold and the proceeds be sent to her sister in New Zealand. And that was 1907. And the sister then lived until 1915. But you'll see here that's her original signature. That's her original signature. And that will was made on the 10th of July 1907. And she dies on the 30th of August 1907. So at this generation, wills were made very shortly before death, because obviously they knew their health was failing and they wanted to settle their affairs. And that's the picture of the lady in question. And she was about 70 when she died, so for interest. Now, we're on to the final part of the talk today, is about prison records. And PRONI would hold quite a large range of prison records. You see the dates and the references there that you can look at. Obviously, Armagh Prison, Belfast Prison and Londonderry Prison were all existing in the 19th century, but unfortunately we don't have the records here in PRONI. We do have for Belfast, for the men and women, although there are gaps, but unfortunately we don't have Armagh or Londonderry Prison. We have a register of the inmates of the prison ship Alrada, and also the internment records of those who were interned in the various instances where internment was used from the 1920s up to the 1970s. And we do have quite a bit, 5,000 or 6,000 files of individuals there. Again, the early registers here that I'm referring to for the prisons are closed simply because, or many are closed simply because of their condition. They were housed in damp prisons and they have not survived very well, but they're currently undergoing conservation treatment, and we hope that they're made available very soon. Some certainly should be, I think, very soon, because they've undergone quite a lot of work, and you'll see that in a minute. but they're fascinating in terms of what they contain. Names of prisoners, their address, distinguishing features and so on that they might have to, if they escape, they know who they're looking for, what they're in for, what crime they're committed, how long they've got to serve, and when they're released. You'll see here, these are some of the images from the prison registers. I'm looking at the time here, we're okay for time. This little boy is at 13, and we don't have the corresponding register, so we can't tell what he's been imprisoned for. But he's Joel McKiernan. He's got his hands up to show you, I've got no scars or no tattoos on my hands. And it's just a thing that was done at that time. Then you have other men here. We don't know his name's not recorded. It may well, in the fullest time, may be able to locate who this person is, but not at the minute. And again, another man here, he was released from Belfast prison in 1897. So he's probably born in 1860, 55, something like that date. And may well be the only photograph that there is of this gentleman at that time. Then you have this man here, a bit spooky, isn't it? This man is a William Bradley. Now he died. He was sent to the Derry prison, or had come from the Derry prison, sorry, and was sent to the Grantia Asylum in Londonderry, and he was admitted when he was 96 years old, and he lived to 99 in the asylum. You'll see there, it's not a mirage, we're not looking at something odd. He's missing his right hand, and he's a woodcutter. So you'll see there that was taken, even though that gentleman could barely walk probably at this stage of his life. They took all photographs of inmates in the asylums, and some have come from the prisons. As dementia set in, they were then moved to the asylum, and in his case that's when that happened. So he was born in 1819, and he ends up in Derry prison, and then he ends up in the asylum. So we know his name and all about him. There's no family members for him. You'll see there then a prison index, prisoner register index, which is basically the list of names of all of the people there who were sent to Belfast prison in the 1870s, 1880s. And they're all listed alphabetically. And then that refers you into the main register, which tells you all about the offences and so on. And again, the range of offences involved would be from the completely ridiculous, we would think today, to the most serious you can think of, and everything in between. So the usual ones would be assault, being drunk, begging, stealing, and so on. And these are men of Belfast, and it tells you their address and their age, and their complexion, their height, their weight, their denomination, and so on. And then what the sentence was. So a guy there, David Devlin, he's 22, and he got 7 days for begging in Belfast, in Crumlin Road Jail in 1889. And then you have here a much later volume then of 1942, and the first man we see there is Joseph Cahill, and he's been he's been sent to prison for murder, and he's 21 at this time, and you'll see there. And you'll see there's various other people who are being interned because they are for treason in the 1940s. So this is the sort of the campaign at that time, terrorist campaign at that time. Then again another image here, this time the ladies, women who were in Belfast prison, and you'll see there, you see now, it's sorry, wrong one. It's the lady here, Anne Thompson. She stole a tablecloth, and she gets 4 days in prison. And another lady here steals a pot of jam. Here we are, or stealing an apron, sorry. And she's in there for, I think, 2 days. And she's 22. And we'll just go on a bit more. We'll see, yes, there is a woman here called Jane Clark. 1888. And steals a pot of jam, 7 days in prison, in Crumlin Road Jail, for stealing a pot of jam. So another lady does exactly the same thing further on down the page, but there are obviously much more serious crimes there, like prostitution and so on, or killing somebody, or robbery, or hitting a policeman. All of these things are recorded. But obviously, if you know the name of the individual who you're looking for, or you believe someone in your locality or in your family was either went to prison for something, you can obviously look at these registers. And if you don't have that, you can still look at them. So I need to know basic sort of thing. So how do I access these prison registers and anything else that's closed in PRONI? Well, as I say, many of the records are closed simply because either they're too fragile or they contain what we regard as personal information. So you wouldn't want, if it's your family member, someone looking at your family member's records in that way. So we have to leave it a long time till their personal information no longer is personal. And that is deemed for the fact that they're now 100 years old. That's how the law looks at it. So requests can still be made to see this information, and in terms of the prison records or any other records that you want to look at, you can apply in writing to PRONI. And in this example here, it's been said that you should give us the name of the prisoner and information that might help us to find that person, such as the details of the case, when they were imprisoned, where they were imprisoned, and their address. Just helps us to narrow down the individual, to make sure we get the right person. Because with many of these records, you have the same name appearing, but different people. And all the applications that you apply under will be dealt with through the FOI Act or the Data Protection Act, depending on the type of application. And again, if it's a coroner's inquest or a court record you're looking for, again, it's the same thing. Name of the individual, type of case, where the case was heard, and so on. And all of the requests should be dealt with, should be sent to my section in PRONI, Records Management, Cataloguing and Access section. And there's our email address at the bottom. But there are also, many other records I haven't talked about today, such as discharge books and so on, which record when a prisoner is discharged from prison, visiting books, people who came to see prisoners in prison, which again would be closed because those people have a right to privacy and would not expect their details to be made public, still within their lifetime. So those are still obviously closed, but people can still apply to see them and say, well, I believe my mother may have gone to see a prisoner, a friend of hers or something like that, and did she not, this sort of thing. So again, they're all worth pursuing, worth investigating, and I hope that the flavour you've got today, I hope it's not too much of a gallop through of all these records, will encourage you to look at these records in a different light and order them out. And if you have any questions, you can ask them at the end, or you can come up to me if you want to. So again, thank you very much indeed.